Nadia was 27 when her supervisor asked her, gently and by email, whether she would consider presenting her small research paper at an international literature conference in Istanbul the following spring. She read the email 3 times and then closed her laptop and put her forehead against the cool wood of her desk in the small university library where she worked, and she did not move for almost 20 minutes. She had loved English since she was 9 years old. She had read her way through the school library, then her town library, then most of the university library at the small city college where she had earned her degree. She wrote articles for a modest academic newsletter that fewer than 200 people read. Her written English was, according to her supervisor, more careful and more graceful than that of many native speakers. But she had never in her life spoken more than a handful of English sentences aloud to another human being. Not because she could not, because she could not begin. She was shy in the way some people are tall. It was simply the shape of her. When she was a child, her mother had gently apologized for her to relatives who found her too quiet. When she was a student, her teachers had marked her down for participation while praising her essays. When she was 22 and had briefly worked as a receptionist to help pay her rent, she had cried in the small break room after her first telephone call. She had trained herself over many careful years to build a life where nobody would ever require her to speak aloud in English. And she had almost succeeded, until Istanbul. She almost refused. She composed the polite refusal 3 times in her head that night, and each time she deleted it. In the end, she said yes, though her hands shook while she typed the word. She had 8 months. She began the same way she had always begun anything difficult, by reading about it. She watched videos, quietly and privately, in the middle of the night when nobody could see her searching. Most of them made her feel worse. They were made by cheerful people who told her to be brave, join a conversation group, book a language partner, force herself into the discomfort. Every video made her feel a little smaller. She had tried these things before, some of them multiple times. She had left every one of them in tears. Then one night she found a small, quiet video made by a woman with a soft voice who spoke directly to shy learners the way one might speak to a small, tired animal. Slowly, warmly, without a single suggestion that shyness was a problem to be defeated. The woman offered a method that Nadia understood immediately, not because it was complicated, but because it was designed for a person shaped exactly like her. The first thing the method asked of her was to question her fear rather than obey it. This surprised her. She had always treated her fear as a truth, a kind of whether she could only wait out. But she began in the small evenings to write down her fears in her notebook, and then to ask them small, honest questions. She wrote, "I am afraid people will laugh at my accent." Then she wrote below it honestly, "Has anyone ever laughed at your accent?" She thought for a long time. "No," she wrote, "not once." She wrote, "I am afraid I will forget my words in the middle of a sentence." She wrote below it, "Is this actually likely to happen at a conference?" "Perhaps once," she wrote. "And if it does," she wrote, "will the world end?" "No," she wrote back to herself softly, "it will not." She began to notice, slowly, that her fears did not survive being written down and questioned. Not because they disappeared, but because they shrank to their real size, which was almost always much smaller than they had felt. The second thing the method asked of her was to reframe her shyness as a strength rather than a defect. This took her longer. She had been told her whole life, sometimes kindly and sometimes not, that her quietness was a problem. She had believed it. But she began to notice, in her reading and in her observations, that some of the writers she loved most had been shy people. Their sentences carried a weight that louder writers rarely produced. Their listening had been unusually deep. Their attention to small things had been extraordinary. She wrote, "One evening in her notebook, my shyness has taught me to listen. My shyness has taught me to notice. My shyness will one day make my English sound warmer and more thoughtful than it would otherwise have been." She read that line every morning for a week. Then she began to believe it, a little at a time. The third thing the method asked of her was to build her English speaking through practice that nobody would ever see. This part came as a relief so profound that she nearly wept. She did not have to join a conversation group. She did not have to book a language partner. She did not have to force herself into a room full of louder people. She could grow quietly in her own kitchen, and no one would ever know until she was ready. She began the next morning. She woke 20 minutes earlier than usual and made her tea slowly, and she narrated it aloud, softly in English. She said, "I am pouring the water. I am opening the tea box. I am waiting for the leaves to steep. Her voice sounded strange to her the first 3 mornings. By the second week, it did not. In the evenings, she read a page of an English novel aloud, slowly and clearly in her armchair by the window to no one at all. On Sunday afternoons, she recorded herself speaking for 2 minutes on her phone about whatever had happened that week. She did not go back and listen to the old recordings for a long time. She only knew that they were there. She whispered English to herself on the bus, so softly that nobody could hear. She rehearsed in her mind the small conversations she might have at the conference. She imagined the questions someone might ask her, and she answered them in her head with careful, warm sentences. She did all of this in a small, warm corner of her flat that she began, without planning to think of as her English corner. A soft chair, a lamp with a warm bulb, a small notebook on the table, a cup that was hers alone. Her nervous system began, slowly, to associate that corner with English, and then with safety, and then with something almost like pleasure. The fourth thing the method asked of her was to notice her small wins and write them down. This one felt embarrassing to her at first. Her wins were so small. She had said yes clearly to a coworker who asked if she wanted coffee. She had read aloud for 10 minutes without stopping. She had answered the phone at the library front desk in English without freezing, though it had only been 3 words. She wrote them down anyway. 1 line per day, in a small hardcover notebook she kept beside her bed. After a month, she had 30 small lines. She read them all one Sunday evening, and something inside her lifted. She could see in her own handwriting that she had been moving. She had not felt like she was moving, but there it was on the page. There were hard weeks. In the 4th month, she wanted very badly to stop. She had been practicing every day for over 100 days, and she still felt her heart run every time she imagined the stage in Istanbul. She sat in her English corner one Wednesday evening and cried, quietly and without drama, and considered writing to her supervisor to withdraw. She did not. She had read, in the quiet video and in the books she had found afterwards, that this exact moment came for almost every shy learner around month 4 or 5, and that quitting at this moment was the most common mistake shy learners made. She trusted the woman with the soft voice, whom she had never met, and she kept going. The 5th thing the method asked of her in the end was to trust the long journey, to keep faith with growth that could not be seen from the inside, to believe that the plant was growing even when the soil looked still. She did not believe it easily, but she practiced believing it, the way she practiced everything else, one small day at a time, until the belief itself became a habit. By the 7th month, small, unexpected things began to happen. She held a full 3-minute conversation with a visiting scholar at the library about a poet they both loved, and she did not freeze once. She called her landlord to report a broken tap and handled the whole call in English without her heart running. She spoke up in a small departmental meeting and made a suggestion that her supervisor later described, in an email that she saved, as unusually thoughtful. She flew to Istanbul in the 8th month with her small notebook in her bag. On the morning of her presentation, she sat in a small, warm cafe near the venue and drank her tea slowly and said to herself, in her own head, quietly, "I am scared, and I am going to speak anyway." Then she walked to the venue and gave her 20-minute paper to a room of 38 people. Her hands trembled once near the middle. Her voice did not. When she finished, a woman in the 2nd row asked her a question. Nadia paused and thought and answered warmly and completely. The woman thanked her. Nadia sat down and felt her heart, still running a little, and understood that she had done it. She was still shy. She would always be shy. She preferred small rooms to big ones, and she needed quiet after long social days, and she still found small talk mildly exhausting. None of that had changed. What had changed was that her voice, when she needed it, was no longer locked. It came out warmly, slowly, in her own careful shape, and people listened to it with the same attention that she had always given to their words. 2 years later, a younger student at her university, a quiet 19-year-old who wrote beautifully but could not speak in class, came to Nadia in the library one afternoon and asked her, in a small voice, whether it was possible for someone shy to become fluent. Nadia thought for a long moment. She looked at the girl, who reminded her, painfully, of the person she had been at that desk 8 years earlier. "Yes," she said quietly, "it is possible. It is not fast. It does not happen through becoming a different person. It happens through becoming more fully yourself in a small, warm corner, one quiet morning at a time."